This morning we will look at breathing as a meditation object. It's one of the most common meditation objects used. So we'll have a look at how we might work with it. And we'll begin with some experiments in breathing. So if you get into your meditation posture, and with all these meditation experiments, don't take anything for granted beforehand. Be open to something new. Just see what is actually happening without any previous ideas getting in the way. So if you get into your meditation posture, and constructing the posture from the ground up, the grip, the lift and the balance, as we've been talking about. And open your awareness up to the whole body, experiencing the whole body. As you sit quietly, you notice the body is still. Start to focus in on this sense of stillness. And then, as you experience that stillness, you notice that within the stillness there is movement. Movement within the body. Start to focus in on that movement. You'll notice this movement is associated with the inhalation and the exhalation. Start to focus in on the movements associated with the inhalation and the exhalation. And focus in particular at those places where these movements are clearest, strongest, most obvious to you. Where are these movements clearest, strongest, most obvious? Focus on that location. There are two movements, one associated with inhalation, one associated with exhalation. If they are movements, they must be moving somewhere. They must have some kind of direction. They must be travelling in some kind of path. In what direction are these movements travelling? What sort of path do they describe? Straight, curved, vertical, horizontal, round, square. Focus on direction and the shapes that they make as they move. In what direction are these movements travelling? There are two movements, one associated with exhalation and one associated with inhalation. Of these two movements, which one is longer and which one is shorter? Or are they both the same length? Focus on length. How long are they? Is one shorter or longer than the other? If so, which one? The movement associated with the inhalation or the movement associated with the exhalation? Or are they the same length? Focus on length. How long are these movements? We have two movements, one associated with inhalation, one associated with exhalation. Is one of these movements more or less clear than the other? Is one of them clear and the other not? Or are they both clear? Or are they both obscure, unclear? Focus on clarity. Which movement is clearest? Which movement is least clear? Or are they both the same? There are two movements, one associated with inhalation, one with exhalation. And if there are two movements, then each movement must have a beginning and an end. Can you see the beginning of the movement associated with inhalation? Can you see the end of that movement? Can you see the beginning of the movement associated with exhalation? Can you see the end of that movement? Focus on beginnings and ends. Can you see the point where they begin and the point where they end? Or are you missing parts? If you are missing something, which part are you missing? In order to do these exercises, we have to be very precise and accurate in our aim. As you practice this precision, do you feel any sense of strain within the mind or the body, any sense of tension? Do you find any tension in the body associated with these exercises? Do you find yourself interfering with the movements in any way, trying to make them do what you want them to do? If you find any of this happening, any sense of strain in the mind, any tension in the body, any interference with the movements, then relax. Step back from the detail of the movements and relax. Watch the movements. Don't do them, just watch them. Drop the interference. If you can't help but interfere, if you can't stop interfering with the movements, then make the interference itself the meditation object. Don't watch the movements, but watch the mind which is interfering with the movements. And now, open up your awareness again to the whole body. Don't focus in on anything, but open up to the sense of the whole body. As you do so, do you find any sense of ease or of pleasure in the body? If you do, take your awareness back one step to that sense of ease, of pleasure, and rest in that sense of ease, that sense of pleasure, of relaxation. Allow the energies, allow the movements to flow throughout the body, but just stay back in that sense of ease, relaxation, pleasure. Okay. Where did you find the movements? Down in the belly? So all the way up and down. Whole torso from here down to here. Anywhere else?
When I open my eyes, when at the very beginnings, I still feel the movement. When I close the eyes, the movement becomes not clear.
The movements were clearer when you had your eyes open and less clear when they were closed.
When you close the eyes, the chest becomes more obvious.
It's the chest. When you close your eyes, the movements are felt in the chest. And when you open the eyes, where are they?
Before I close my eyes, the movement is at the abdomen.
Or diaphragm, up here? Yep.
Then, but my heartbeat is stronger than the movement.
So the strongest movement is actually the heartbeat. Anyone find that actually the heartbeat is stronger than the movements of the breathing?
Even can hear the sound like
Anybody else find that? Yeah, that sometimes happens. Did it calm down or did it stay the same? Sorry? Stay for some time, then it went away? Hmm. Mm-hmm. So it was all very rough, the breathing. What directions did these movements travel in? Was it vertical, horizontal, round? It was like this shape, going back and forth, but down. So spiraling down, then straight up. Ah, very interesting. So first it was up down, and then it was forward back, and then waving. Yeah. Which one was longest? Exhalation. How many people would vote for exhalation as longest? How many would vote for inhalation? And how many would vote for equal length? A few. So we have a strange minority who have an equal length. Anything can happen. Suspect that the majority of people, the exhalation is longer, but it doesn't have to happen that way. Sometimes it's the inhalation. Sometimes it's the same length, and of course it changes for the same person. So you might have one sitting in which the exhalation is longer, and the next sitting the exhalation is shorter. There's no set rule. Which one is clearest? Exhalation or inhalation? How many people would say exhalation is clearer than inhalation? Got a few people. How many would say that inhalation is clearer than exhalation? Majority. How many would say both equally clear? More equals. And how many would say equally unclear? Well done.
It's unclear when you get to a very low your blood rate and you get to that point and everything is like very little.
So which point is this when it becomes unclear? When it becomes very subtle?
When you get into a deeper state.
Oh, when it becomes deeper.
It becomes almost, even if you had to draw a line, it's just like little waves.
The comment here is, as you go deeper in the meditation practice, breathing becomes less clear or more subtle. More subtle. And this is because samadhi is developing. One of the symptoms of samadhi is that the experience becomes more subtle. If that's happening, then that's a good sign that the samadhi is developing. One of the symptoms of mindfulness is the experience is becoming more clear. Sometimes you get the experience is becoming very subtle but not clear. So it's getting harder and harder to find. And this can, in particular, can happen with the breathing. What this means is that the samadhi is getting stronger faster than the mindfulness, and so they're out of balance. So mindfulness is comparatively weak, samadhi comparatively strong. So what you want is to bring them back into balance. What you want is the experience to become subtle but clear. And if you have to choose between subtlety and clarity, choose clarity. So you might find that the breathing is very subtle and it's very difficult to get to it, but physical sensation is much more clear. Then drop the breathing, go to the sensation and stay with that. And as that bit starts to become more subtle, then the breathing might come back into view. You want subtlety and clarity balanced. Otherwise, if you get the subtlety but not the clarity, the mind becomes dull. It becomes sinking mind. It's a dead end. So if you have to sacrifice subtlety in order to get clarity, do so. The subtlety will come. Yeah, so as we're saying, probably for the majority, exhalation is more subtle or less clear. What about beginnings and ends? Did you find beginnings and ends of inhalation and of exhalation, or were you missing bits? And if you were missing bits, which bits were you missing? How many people found beginning and end of inhalation? I'm confident about that. How many people found beginning and end of exhalation? Fewer. Beginning.
And exhalation.
Beginning of exhalation, end of exhalation.
Beginning of exhalation and beginning of exhalation.
So you found beginnings of both, but what about ends?
And not clear.
Ends not clear. Sometimes when I do this exercise, some people say, well, wait, there's not two movements, there's only one movement. How many people found that actually there's only one movement? Yeah.
It's more end and beginning, which is exchange, but there's a second form where it is exchange. How I think is beginning, end, and so is end and beginning. So it's just like, but there is a point where you have to aware that point is the like exchanging is
So it's one continuous movement, but there's a point where there's a turnaround. And there are two turnarounds.
so there's the end, also a beginning.
So the end is the beginning is the end. Yeah. And that turnaround is very subtle, and you've got to be really sharp to catch it. Again, you can see that there's no right way of doing it or experiencing it. People have a whole range of different experiences. But often people find that if they're going to miss part, they'll miss towards the end of the exhalation. Remember, the majority said exhalation is less clear than inhalation. If you're going to start missing part, it's more likely you're going to start missing towards the end of the exhalation. Now, what we tend to do, if that happens, is we have, again, a concept. I'm breathing. I'm following the exhalation. It must be there, because I must be exhaling. Although the actual experience drops away, the mind will substitute a perception, a concept, and use that instead to fill in the gap. And then the inhalation starts, and that's pretty obvious. So the perception is dropped, and so I follow that, and then back in the exhalation fades out of sight, and the mind substitutes a perception of some sort. Now this is very common. If you're doing meditation for serenity, you just want to develop samadhi, it doesn't matter. Because so long as the mind has got something to hook onto, and it's very subtle, it doesn't matter. But if you're doing meditation for insight, it does matter. Because one of the basic aspects of insight is the ability to tell the difference between the body and the mind. To be able to drop beneath the ordinary world of concept and see the directly experienced reality. So if the directly experienced reality is body, perception, body, you want to see body, perception, body. You need to notice that this is going on. So you see the difference between the two approaches. If you're meditating for insight, it requires more sharpness, more precision in the way that you relate to your meditation object. Someone meditating for serenity, someone meditating for insight can have exactly the same meditation object. What's different is the relationship to it. So the person meditating for insight tries to be much more precise whenever possible and is much more interested in every aspect of change. It's just changed from body to mind and back to body. And you're interested in that. You want to develop this sensitivity to the fact of change. If you're meditating for serenity, you're not interested in change. The more saneness you have, the better, actually, because it's smoother, it's calmer. You can absorb into it easily. Practice for insight has a kind of a rougher, more granular feel to it than meditation for serenity. Sometimes, not necessarily, but it can have that feeling. It's about the relationship to your meditation object, and here we're talking about the relationship to breathing. Yep.
You mentioned the word perception.
Mm-hmm.
Can you please explain again?
When I said perception, it's a concept of the breathing. It's a concept of the breath, where it's not actually a purely physical thing, but something that the mind is creating. Sometimes it might be associated with an inner sound, some kind of feeling which isn't actually the breathing, because the breathing has disappeared. There's a knowing of that perception. That's awareness. There's something there, but the mind is creating something rather than simply having the pure movement itself.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, vaguely.
I think I have an example because in that exercise, at first I realised that I had this idea that the exhalation sort of fades out, and I was finding it really difficult to see at what point it fades out. And then I realised that was just a concept, and I went back to the actual movement of the exhalation, and it was really easy to see where the movement stopped.
It just stopped.
There was a gap
Hmm.
before the inhalation movement started. So it was shifting between the concept of this fading out exhalation to actually seeing the movement.
Yeah, you're right, that's a good one. Emma's example is this. She has the idea that the exhalation fades out gradually. So she's trying to track it as it fades out, but isn't having much success. And then finally she realises, actually this idea that the exhalation fades out is just an idea. And then she drops the idea and starts to look at the actual movement, and she discovers it doesn't fade out, it just ends. It's completely different. It's like the idea that we have of something can be completely different from what it actually is. At a more obvious level, the idea that I have of someone can be completely different from the actual person. You know, the classic example, if in a silent retreat, obviously not an SBS retreat, but an actual silent retreat where meditators aren't talking to each other, people will go through a retreat. They see someone at the retreat, but they don't talk to them. But of course, as you know, in retreats, you look around and you start to build up stories about every person. And you create all these perceptions about your fellow meditators. So you can build up a whole image of someone. And at the end of the retreat, go up and talk to them, convinced you know them really well, and discover they're nothing like your perception of them. And this can be either a disappointment or a relief, depending on the circumstances. The difference between a perception and the actual event.
Could be a delusion.
It's definitely a delusion. To some degree, it's definitely a delusion. Did anybody find any sense of strain in the mind or tension in the body as they were doing this? This is the danger when you try to be precise. Precision in practice for insight is very important. The more precise, the better. But in trying to be precise, we can start to put in too much effort. And we can tell there's too much effort by this quality of strain in the mind or any kind of tension in the body that builds up. Now, if there's strain or tension, the one obvious result of this is that we cannot do this for very long because the strain builds up and enough, I can't stand this anymore. In severe cases, they develop a really bad relationship to meditation. Every time they meditate, they develop incredible strain and tension. And meditation becomes very difficult, very unpleasant. If they're very strong-willed, they might keep going and develop maybe chronic headaches or something. Otherwise they give up. It's too hard and they walk away. There should be no tension in the body associated with meditation. And if there's strain in the mind, then there's too much effort. This brings us to the whole question of right effort, and right effort is very, very delicate. It takes a long time to find it. To be fully committed to the action of this moment without any strain, any pushing or pulling. If you look at the whole experience of strain, often it's associated with our concept of time. I'm doing this exercise. I've been told to look for something, but I can't see it. I think if I make more effort, I will see it in the future. So I have an image of the ideal situation in the future. At last it'll be clear and I'll be able to do this exercise. And I somehow have to push through what's happening now in order to get to my future result. And that's often the way that we live. It's like when we go to work or study, this is what we're doing. In meditation, it's a complete disaster. The image that we have of the future is simply an image which arises now, in the present. And this image is getting in the way of our relationship to, in this case, the breathing. Be careful. Notice the way that you practice, what Uttejaniya calls the attitude. Is there a hardness in the mind? Is there a grasping? I want the result. Is there a resistance? I'm pushing away what's really happening because I don't want it. Drop all that. Just relax. Just be relaxed with whatever is happening. Sometimes we cannot be precise. We can't do it. Sometimes we can. So when we can, then do it. When we can't, forget about it. And just be more open, be more relaxed with the whole thing. Anybody find a sense of ease or pleasure within the body? Yeah. A few people? Yeah. This is when you step back and just stop working. This is, you notice how what we're doing is sometimes we're going in and being very focused and precise. Sometimes we're stepping out and being very wide and very open. Now both of these are perfectly good, valid ways of working with attention and awareness. Sometimes one is appropriate, sometimes the other is appropriate. And it's good for the meditator to be able to move between both. Sometimes deliberately, sometimes it just happens quite spontaneously. So to become familiar with both. The stepping back and being wide open can be very refreshing, very restful for the mind. The precision can be very interesting and very insightful. Some people naturally incline towards being precise. Some people naturally incline towards being open, and they find the precision difficult. Whatever you find that is your natural style, cultivate that, do that. But don't just push away the other one. Every now and again go in and explore that other one, because you want to develop multiple skills. You want to develop your capacity as a meditator, and meditation is a craft. Sometimes you do it one way, sometimes you do it the other way. So you want to be familiar with the different ways of doing things, not just have one thing only that you do, but have a variety of things. Play to your strengths. If a particular way is natural to you, then do that. but check out other ways as well, every now and again. In other words, be playful with it. Don't be rigid with just one way of doing things. Now you notice that while this is supposedly about breathing, in fact we use the word breathing as little as possible. And what we talked about was movement. This is coming back to this elemental relationship to experience. The Buddha uses the term vayo dhatu, air element, when he's talking about inhalation and exhalation. I forget the Pali, but those words too have to do with what in the Chinese culture would be called qi. It's the same. It's not that there's this special flow of energy which is breathing and then there's all these other flows of energy. There's just energy. And some of these energies we call breathing and some of them we call something else. But that's just a concept. What we're working with in the breathing is movement itself. So don't get caught up in a narrow concept of what the breathing is or what it should be or where it should be or what it should be doing. Some people, when they're following the breathing, actually there's no inhalation and exhalation. There's just all these crazy movements. And they couldn't actually pinpoint that this is inhalation, this is exhalation. Sometimes the breathing, in inverted commas, might stop. Anything can happen. Follow the movements themselves and follow them where they are clearest and most obvious to you. Again, this has to do with mindfulness. Mindfulness is stimulated by a clear perception. If you want to develop mindfulness, go for what is clear, what is obvious. Follow the movements where they are clearest and most obvious. That may not be where you expect the breathing to be. Some people feel it, for example, in the shoulders. You can feel it anywhere. Track the movements where they are clearest and most obvious. Okay, I think we're done. Any final questions or comments? Yeah.
Technically, is there a period when there is no inhalation or exhalation?
Yeah.
Just rest?
Yeah, there can be a period where there's neither inhalation nor exhalation. Some meditators really notice this, others don't. If you're doing pranayama, that period of neither is deliberately cultivated. People would train themselves to hold that and to increase the gap where there is neither inhalation nor exhalation. The Buddha, when he was practicing before he became the Buddha, he did that too, but in a different tradition. He did that in an ascetic tradition where he was pushing it very hard and getting a great deal of pain associated with it. In this practice, we're not trying to make the breath do anything in particular. We're just following it. Although some people find that they can't effectively do breathing meditation. For example, some people are naturally shallow breathers. Some people are very frustrated when they meditate and do breathing because they just fall asleep. Sitting after sitting, day after day, year after year. Doesn't matter how wide awake they are, they sit, they start to meditate, boom, out. And it's because they're shallow breathers, and when the breathing calms down, they're literally not getting enough oxygen. They have to breathe deliberately when they meditate. They have to, otherwise they can't do it. And the most common form would be to deliberately extend the exhalation. Now, the standard rule that you hear in Buddhist meditation is don't do anything with the breathing. Just follow the breathing. But for some people, they have to do something with the breathing, otherwise they just can't do it.